The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than most cities. Ships from hundreds of worlds floated outside the massive windows, their lights twinkling like stars against the black of space. Inside, creatures of every shape and size filled the curved seats that rose up like steps around the central speaking area. Ambassador Hyunwoo sat in the section marked for minor species. His dark suit looked plain next to the colorful robes and strange armor worn by other delegates. Next to him, his aide Jiho quietly took notes on a simple tablet. They had been coming to these meetings for 3 years now, ever since Earth joined the galactic community. The humans were still new here. Most of the other species had been part of the council for thousands of years. Some had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. But Hyunwoo never felt angry about sitting in the back. He was here to learn, not to demand respect. Today the topic was trade routes. Counselor Velthar of the crystalline hegemony stood at the center podium. His body was made of living crystal that caught and threw back the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The Kepler Nebula route will cut travel time between the outer rim, colonies, and the core worlds by 30%, Velthar explained. His words appeared as floating text in dozens of languages above his head. However, we must consider the dangers. The nebula contains unpredictable energy storms. Other delegates began to speak. The Vrex representative, a creature that looked like a walking tree, worried about the cost. The Altarian delegate, whose blue skin glowed softly, suggested using military escorts. Each species had their own concerns and ideas. Hyunwoo listened carefully to every word. He noticed things that others might miss. The way the Vrex delegate's leaves rustled when he was nervous. How the Altarian's glow grew brighter when she felt strongly about something. Small details that might matter later. When the debate began, to slow down, the council speaker, an ancient being called Morden, looked around the chamber. Are there any other thoughts on this matter? Hyunwoo raised his hand politely. Several delegates turned to look at him with what might have been surprise. Humans rarely spoke during these sessions. Honorable counselors, Hyunwoo said as he stood up. I have studied the trade schedules you have shared. The smaller species who cannot afford large cargo ships are being left out of this new route. Perhaps we could adjust the timing to allow shared transport vessels. Jiho quickly displayed a chart on his tablet, showing how different species could work together to use the new route more fairly. The numbers were clear and simple to understand. Velthar's crystal form sparkled with what looked like approval. An interesting suggestion, Ambassador Hyunwoo. The human perspective on cooperation is always practical. Some delegates made sounds of agreement. Others seemed to think about it carefully. The Vrex delegate's leaves stopped rustling, which Hyunwoo had learned meant he was pleased. After more discussion, the council voted to include Hyunwoo's suggestions in the final plan. It was a small victory, but it would help dozens of smaller species trade more easily with the core worlds. As the session ended and delegates began to leave, an unusual figure approached the human section. Senior Archivist Catherine of the Ancient. Archives moved with slow, careful steps. His body was covered in gray scales, and 4 large eyes sat on stalks that could turn in different directions. He was very old even by galactic standards. Ambassador Hyunwoo, Catherine said, his voice deep and careful. I wonder if I might have a moment of your time. Of course, Archivist, Hyunwoo replied with a slight bow. He had learned that showing respect was important in galactic politics even when talking to beings who were not official diplomats. Catherine's eye stalks moved to look around the nearly empty chamber. I am updating the archive's records of all known species. This is important work that helps us understand the galaxy better. However, I have found a small problem with humanity's file. Jiho looked up from packing his tablet. What kind of problem? Archivist. Your species is listed as human, and your world as Earth, Catherine explained slowly. But our deep scan language computers suggest these might be translated names. For our complete records, we need the original names in your own language. Hyunwoo and Jiho looked at each other. This seemed like a simple request. Most species were proud of their original names and languages. That's easy to answer, Hyunwoo, said with a small smile. In our Korean language, we call ourselves Ingan, and our world Jigu. Though I should mention that humans have many languages. Different regions use different words. Catherine's 4 eyes focused on Hyunwoo with sharp attention. Could you repeat those terms, please? I want to make sure I record them correctly. Ingan, Hyunwoo said clearly, for our species, and Jigu for our homeworld. The archivist made notes on a device that looked like living metal. Thank you, Ambassador. This will help make our records complete. The archives contain information about every species in the galaxy, going back millions of years. Accuracy is very important to us. I understand, Hyunwoo said. History matters. We humans believe that those who forget the past are doomed to repeat its mistakes. Something flickered across Catherine's scaled features. It might have been surprise, or perhaps something else. A wise saying, Ambassador. I hope you never have cause to test its truth. With that strange comment, the archivist bowed politely and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the large chamber. Hyunwoo watched him go, wondering what had made the old being seem suddenly sad. That was odd, Jiho said quietly as they gathered their things. Why did he react that way to a simple saying about history? Hyunwoo shrugged. The archivists are known to be strange. They spend all their time with old records and ancient data. Maybe he knows something about the past that makes him worry about the future. As they left the council chamber and headed back to their ship, neither human realized what they had just set in motion. Deep in the archive world, quantum computers were already beginning to process the new information. Language analysis programs were starting to compare Ingan and Jigu with millions of historical records. The results of that comparison would shake the galaxy to its core. But for now, Hyunwoo and Jiho simply walked through the busy corridors of the council station, planning their report to Earth and thinking about the next day's meetings. They had work to do, and humans were always good at focusing on the task at hand. Behind them, in the great chamber where delegates from across the galaxy had gathered to discuss peaceful trade, empty seats waited for the next session. Soon, those seats would be filled with beings whose ancestors had once fled in terror from creatures that called themselves Ingan and came from a world called Jigu. The galaxy was about to remember its oldest nightmare, and the nightmare was about to remember itself. 3 days later, Senior Archivist Catherine was sleeping peacefully in his chambers deep below the surface of the archive world. The old being needed very little rest, but even his ancient body required some time to recover from the long days spent managing the galaxy's greatest collection of knowledge. A sharp alarm sound woke him from his dreams. Red lights flashed on the walls of his simple room. Catherine's 4 eyes opened quickly, each one focusing on a different warning display. This was not a normal wake-up call. The message was clear. Emergency in central processing. Immediate attention. Required. Catherine moved as fast as his old body would allow through the winding corridors of the archive. The walls were lined with quantum storage devices that held the memories of 1,000 civilizations. Usually, these halls were quiet and peaceful. Now they hummed with unusual energy. When he reached the central processing chamber, he found chaos. Dozens of quantum computers were running at full power, their cooling systems working hard to keep them from overheating. The massive screens that covered the walls showed streams of data flowing too fast for most beings to read. Archive technician Lethmore looked up from her control station. Her tentacles moved quickly over the controls, but her large eyes showed worry. Archivist, the computers have been running for 3 straight days. They started right after you entered those new human terms into the database. What are they processing? Catherine asked, though he already feared the answer. Language, comparison analysis, Lethmore replied. The system is comparing Ingan and Jigu with every historical record we have. But Archivist, it's not just checking recent files. It's going deep into the classified sections, files that require the highest security clearance. Catherine felt his blood grow cold. The archive's computer system was designed to make connections between different pieces of information. Usually, this helped researchers find useful patterns in historical data. But sometimes the computer found connections that were never meant to be discovered. Show me the results, he said quietly. Lethmore touched several controls, and the main screen changed. Numbers appeared that made Catherine's heart stop beating for a moment. Language pattern match 97.3%. Historical reference match 94.7%. Probability of connection 99.8%. This cannot be right, Catherine whispered. Run the analysis again. We have run it 6 times, Archivist, Lethmore said. Her tentacles shook slightly as she spoke. The results are the same every time. The computer believes that Ingan and Jigu are connected to references found in the Omega records. The Omega records. Catherine had hoped he would never hear those words again. The Omega records were the most secret files in the entire archive. They contained information so dangerous that only a few beings in the galaxy were allowed to read them. Access the Omega records, Catherine said, his voice barely above a whisper. Archivist, are you sure? Those files require triple authorization and— Access them now, Catherine said more firmly. I will take full responsibility. The screens changed again. This time, they showed very old text written in the ancient galactic language. The words were faded and hard to read, but their meaning was clear enough to fill Catherine with terror. Reference, Ingu High of Jiguthes. Classification, Omega level threat. Status, extinct. Threat level, galaxy-wide extinction event. The text continued with details that made Catherine wish he had never been born. The Ingu High were described as a species that had once brought the galaxy to its knees. They were not conquerors in the usual sense. They did not want to rule other species or take their resources. They seemed to fight simply because fighting was what they did best. The old records told of worlds that fell not to weapons of mass destruction, but to ground forces that could not be stopped. The Ingu High adapted to any environment, turned any object into a weapon, and refused to surrender even when facing certain death. They healed from wounds that would kill other beings, and they seemed to get stronger the longer a fight lasted. But the most terrifying thing about them was their intelligence. They learned from every battle, every defeat, every victory. Each encounter with the Ingu High made them more dangerous. They studied their enemies as carefully as scientists studied new forms of life. Catherine read report after report from ancient military commanders. All of them said the same thing. The Ingu High could not be reasoned with, could not be intimidated, and would not stop fighting until they or their enemies were completely destroyed. The final report came from Grand Admiral Shakar, the greatest military mind in galactic history. His words were carved into the record like a warning for future generations. They do not fight for land, wealth, or power. They fight because evolution has made them into the perfect weapons. Every part of their bodies, every thought in their minds, every beat of their hearts is designed for war. They are what happens when nature decides to create the ultimate predator. And then, 14,000 years ago, they had simply vanished. The galaxy had celebrated their disappearance, but the celebration had been quiet and fearful. No one knew where the Ingu High had gone or if they would ever return. Now Catherine stared at the evidence that they had returned. They called themselves humans now, and they seemed peaceful enough. But the computer analysis was clear. Humans were the descendants of the galaxy's greatest nightmare. Archivist, Lethmore said softly, what do we do with this information? Catherine closed his 4 eyes and tried to think clearly. If he reported this to the Galactic Council, it could cause panic across the galaxy. Billions of beings would demand that humanity be destroyed before they could remember their true nature. The peaceful coexistence that the galaxy had enjoyed for thousands of years would end in a moment. But if he said nothing and the humans did remember what they once were, the results could be even worse. As he struggled with this impossible choice, his communication device chimed with an urgent message. The message was from the council chambers, marked with the highest priority codes. Emergency session called. Human colony ships detected moving toward Kepler Nebula at speeds that exceed all known technology. Military consultation required immediately. Catherine's hands shook as he read the message. It was starting already. The humans were beginning to show their true capabilities, even if they did not yet understand what those capabilities meant. He looked at Lethmore, whose tentacles had gone completely, still with fear. Then he looked at the screens full of ancient warnings and modern evidence. The choice was no longer his to make. Events were already moving beyond his control. "Prepare a complete copy of the Omega records," he told Lethmore. "Include all the analysis data from the past 3 days. I must present this to the Emergency Council session." As he prepared to leave the archive and carry the galaxy's most terrible secret to its leaders, Catherine wondered if he was about to save civilization or destroy it. The humans had seemed so peaceful, so eager to cooperate and learn, but their ancestors had probably seemed peaceful too, right up until the moment they revealed their true nature. The galaxy was about to learn whether 14,000 years had changed the children of the Inguhai, or if they were simply sleeping predators about to wake up hungry. The Emergency Council chamber was buried deep inside the Council Citadel, protected by walls that could stop planet-killing weapons. Only the most important members of each species were allowed inside this room. Today, the air felt thick with fear and worry. Admiral Yunseo appeared on the large hologram screen in the center of the room. She was standing on the bridge of her ship, the UCS Determination, somewhere in deep space near the Kepler Nebula. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the plain blue uniform of the human colonial fleet. She looked tired, but alert, as if she had been working for many hours without rest. "Honorable counselors," she said with a polite bow of her head, "I received your urgent summons, but I must admit I'm confused about the emergency. My fleet is simply following the trade route expansion plan that was approved just 3 days ago." Counselor Velthar leaned forward in his crystal chair, light reflecting off his body in nervous patterns. The beautiful rainbow colors that usually danced through his form were now sharp and jagged. "Admiral Yunseo, our long-range sensors show your ships moving much faster than we thought possible. How are you achieving these speeds?" Admiral Yunseo looked puzzled by the question. "We made some improvements to our engines using materials we found in the asteroid fields. My engineering team figured out how to combine Vrex crystal technology with Altarian power cores. It's not perfect, but it works well enough to cut our travel time." What she described so casually made several military advisors shift uncomfortably in their seats. Combining technologies from different species was extremely difficult. Most civilizations needed years of research and expensive facilities to make such improvements work. The humans had done it in space, using salvaged materials and basic tools. "Admiral," said Counselor Murthak, a large being whose skin was covered in thick blue fur, "our computers say your ships are moving in what appears to be an attack formation. Can you explain this?" Admiral Yunseo frowned and looked at someone off-screen. "Taemin, bring up our formation display." A moment later, a simple diagram appeared next to her image. "Respectfully, Counselor, this is standard convoy protection. 3 colony ships in the center, supply vessels on the flanks, and our escort frigate in the lead. It's the most efficient way to keep everyone safe while maintaining good speed." To human eyes, it was exactly what she said, a practical arrangement for moving valuable ships through dangerous space. But the military advisors saw something different. They saw a formation that could quickly change from transport mode to combat mode. They saw ships positioned to support each other in battle, with the escort frigate ready to engage threats while the other ships either fought or escaped. In the IO Observer section, Senior Archivist Catherine watched everything with growing fear. Every word the humans spoke, every casual mention of their abilities, matched perfectly with the ancient records of the Inguhai. They were not trying to seem threatening. They were simply being themselves, and that was what made them so terrifying. "Admiral," Counselor Velthar said carefully, "could you tell us about your colony plans? We want to make sure we can provide proper support for human expansion." Admiral Yunseo smiled, looking pleased by the offer of help. "That's very kind of you, Counselor. Let me check our latest projections." She turned to speak with the young officer named Taemin again. After a brief conversation, she turned back to the screen. "According to our current plans, we should have 17 colonies established within the next 10 years. Total population across all colonies should reach about 40 million people. Of course, these numbers might change depending on what resources we find and how quickly we can build the necessary infrastructure. The chamber became completely silent. 40 million people spread across 17 worlds in just 10 years was not normal expansion. It was preparation for something much larger. Most species took centuries to establish that many colonies, and they did it gradually, with careful planning and massive support from their homeworlds. The humans were talking about it like it was a simple construction project. Admiral Yunseo noticed the silence and looked concerned. Have I said something wrong? I know it sounds ambitious, but humans have always been good at adapting to new environments. Our people are excited about the chance to build new homes among the stars. What she did not mention, because it seemed obvious to her, was that each colony was being placed at a strategic location. Some were near important trade routes, others close to rich mineral systems, and a few in positions that would allow quick travel to other parts of the galaxy. To humans, this was just common sense. To the watching council members, it looked like the early stages of a galactic conquest. "Admiral," said General Kekstar of the Hegemony Guard, his voice carefully controlled, "what kind of defenses are you planning for these colonies?" "Basic perimeter sensors and a few patrol craft," Admiral Yunseo replied. "Nothing fancy. Most of the galaxy is peaceful, so we don't expect much trouble. But it's always smart to be prepared just in case." The military advisors exchanged worried glances. Basic human defenses had already proven to be more advanced than many species' best efforts. If this was what they considered minimal protection, what would they build if they actually felt threatened? As the session continued, every question revealed more disturbing information. The humans had backup plans for their backup plans. They had studied the strengths and weaknesses of every major galactic civilization out of curiosity. Their exploration ships carried weapons for asteroid clearing that could level small cities. When asked about their population growth, Admiral Yunseo mentioned that human families were having more children since joining the galactic community. "People feel optimistic about the future," she explained. "There's so much room to grow out here." But the numbers she casually shared showed a birth rate that would double humanity's population within 50 years. Combined with their expansion plans, it meant humans would soon outnumber most galactic species. The final moment of the session came when Counselor Morden asked about human military doctrine. Admiral Yunseo looked surprised by the question. "Doctrine? I suppose you could say we believe in being ready for anything. Humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We've learned from our history that peace is precious, but it's usually temporary, so we stay ready to protect what we care about." After the session ended and Admiral Yunseo's image disappeared, the chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, Counselor Velthar spoke what everyone was thinking. "They don't even realize what they're doing. To them, this is normal behavior. They're not planning conquest, they're just being themselves." "And that," said General Kekstar quietly, "is exactly what makes them so dangerous." That night, Kethrin transmitted the Omega records to every council member with the highest security clearance. His message was simple. "The Inguhai have returned. They call themselves humans now, and they don't remember what they once were. But they're starting to act like their ancestors did. The patterns are exactly the same." By morning, the most powerful species in the galaxy were quietly moving their fleets into defensive positions. They maintained perfect diplomatic relations with humanity, smiling and offering cooperation while preparing for the possibility of war. The question was no longer whether the humans were the children of the Inguhai. The question was whether they could be stopped before they fully awakened to their heritage, or if the galaxy was about to face its greatest nightmare all over again. In the depths of space, Admiral Yunseo continued leading her fleet toward the Kepler Nebula, completely unaware that her peaceful mission had just convinced the galaxy's leaders that humanity posed an existential threat to all life. The Altarian flagship Cosmic Sovereignty drifted silently in the empty space between galactic sectors, its hull dark and cold to avoid detection. Inside the ship's most secure conference room, representatives from the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy sat around a circular table. This was the first time in 3,000 years that these beings had met as potential military allies. instead of peaceful diplomats. Grand Admiral Krelnos of the Altarian fleet stood at the head of the table, his blue skin glowing with barely controlled energy. The patterns of light that moved across his body showed deep worry and fear. Around him, beings who normally spent their time discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges now studied military reports and battle plans. "The evidence cannot be ignored," Krelnos began, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. "Every action taken by the humans follows the exact patterns described in the Omega records. They are not consciously planning an invasion, but they are unconsciously preparing for one." The holographic displays around the room showed star maps marked with human activities. Red dots indicated new colonies, yellow lines showed shipping routes, and blue symbols marked exploration sites. To anyone else, it might have looked like normal expansion by a growing civilization, but to these military leaders it looked like something much more dangerous. Field Marshal Ziktar of the Hegemony Guard stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. His species had once been warriors, but they had learned to value peace after centuries of bloody conflict. Now, looking at the human expansion patterns, old instincts were awakening. "My analysts have studied 14,000 years of military history," Ziktar said, his deep voice rumbling through the room. "Every defensive strategy we have developed, every safe position we have established, every protocol designed to prevent another Inguhai invasion, the humans are unconsciously finding ways around all of it." He gestured to one of the displays which showed a detailed map of the Kepler Nebula region. "Look at their colony placement. Each location appears to be chosen for economic reasons, but together they form a network that could control all major hyperspace routes in this sector. If they wanted to cut off trade between the core worlds and the Outer Rim, they would be in perfect position to do it." Counselor Velthar's crystal form flickered with nervous energy. "But surely they don't realize what they're doing." Admiral Yun Seo seemed genuinely confused by our questions. They appear to be acting on instinct rather than conscious planning. "That makes them more dangerous, not less," replied Intelligence. Chief Bakthul, whose gray skin and multiple eyes allowed him to study several documents at once. "Conscious planning can be predicted and countered. Instinctive behavior based on genetic memory is much harder to anticipate." The communication system chimed softly, and Commander Daeho of the Human Deep Space Patrol appeared on the main screen. He was younger than Admiral Yun Seo, with short black hair and the kind of alert expression that suggested he never stopped thinking about potential problems. "Greetings, honored allies," Daeho said with a respectful bow. "I wanted to update you on our exploration activities in the Outer Rim. We've discovered some fascinating archaeological sites that show evidence of advanced ancient civilizations. We're sending research teams to 17 different systems to study these ruins." After he signed off, the War Council stared at the star map in complete silence. Every single system Commander Daeho had mentioned contained hidden Inguhai military installations carefully concealed and forgotten for millennia. Somehow the humans were being drawn to the remnants of their ancestors' empire like metal drawn to a magnet. "How can they not know?" whispered Counselor Murthak, his blue fur standing on end with fear. "They're going directly to sites that don't appear on any public maps. Sites that we've spent thousands of years trying to forget." Agent Bakthul activated another display, this one showing samples of human entertainment and educational materials. "We have been monitoring their media transmissions. The results are disturbing." The screen filled with images from human movies, books, and games. All of them showed the same themes: conflict, survival, victory against impossible odds. Heroes who never surrendered, who found ways to win even when facing superior enemies, who turned desperate situations into opportunities for triumph. "Their entire culture celebrates the qualities that made the Inguhai so dangerous," Bakthul continued. "They have spent their entire recorded history preparing mentally for challenges that most species would never even consider facing." Insuk, the human xenobiologist who had been invited to present medical data to the Council, appeared on another screen. Her research was supposed to help with human integration into galactic society, but her findings had revealed something much more troubling. The latest medical scans of human subjects show remarkable adaptability, Dr. Insuk said, clearly excited by her discoveries. Their bodies contain backup systems that activate under stress. Their healing rates increase during periods of conflict. Most interesting of all, their brain activity actually improves under pressure. It's as if they were designed by evolution specifically for survival in dangerous conditions. What Dr. Insuk described as fascinating biological adaptations, the War Council heard as confirmation of their worst fears. Humans were not just descendants of the Inguhai, they were improved versions refined by thousands of years of additional evolution. General Kekstar of the Hegemony Guard activated a tactical display showing theoretical battle scenarios. We have run simulations based on known human capabilities. In every scenario where humans become hostile, our combined fleets have less than a 30% chance of victory. And that assumes they remain at their current technology level and population size. What if they continue expanding as planned? Asked Counselor Velthar. The display changed to show new calculations. The probability of galactic victory dropped to less than 5% within 50 years, assuming normal human growth rates and technological advancement. There is something else, Bakthul said quietly. We have detected changes in human behavior over the past few months. Small changes, but consistent across their entire population. They are becoming more organized, more focused, more military in their thinking. The evidence was subtle but clear. Human exploration teams were moving with increased precision. Their colony ships carried more supplies than necessary for peaceful settlement. Their diplomatic messages showed a growing confidence that bordered on assertiveness. It's as if they're remembering something they never forgot, Field Marshal Ziktar observed. The knowledge is in their genes, waiting for the right trigger to awaken it fully. Grand Admiral Krelnos looked around the table at faces filled with fear and uncertainty. We must make a decision. Do we act now while they are still unaware of their true nature? Or do we hope that somehow, impossibly, they have evolved beyond their ancestors' instincts? The question hung in the air like a death sentence waiting to be pronounced. Every being in the room knew the stakes. If they acted against humanity and were wrong, they would be guilty of destroying an innocent species. If they waited and were wrong, they might be condemning the entire galaxy to conquest or extinction. There is a third option, said Counselor Velthar slowly. We could try to guide them, help them understand their history in a way that might prevent them from repeating it. And if that fails, asked Ziktar, then at least we will have tried to find a peaceful solution before resorting to war. As the War Council continued their debate deep in the hidden chambers of the cosmic sovereignty, they had no way of knowing that their fears were about to be realized in the most unexpected way possible, not through military conquest or violent awakening, but through the same quality that had made the Inguhai unstoppable, their relentless desire to understand and learn about everything around them. The humans were about to discover their own true nature, and when they did, the galaxy would learn whether knowledge could be more dangerous than ignorance. Dr. Su-Jin stood at the front of the Council's Academic Division auditorium, completely unaware that her presentation would change the fate of the galaxy. She was a small woman with bright, intelligent eyes and the kind of enthusiasm that made even boring topics seem exciting. Her research on galactic civilizations had been her life's work, and today she was finally ready to share her most important discoveries. The audience was filled with scholars, historians, and cultural experts from dozens of species. They had come to hear about human theories on galactic development, expecting a routine academic discussion. In the back rows, several intelligence agents sat quietly, monitoring the presentation for any useful information. Senior archivist Kethrin was also present, his 4 eyes focused intently on Dr. Su-Jin as she activated her presentation display. He had a terrible feeling about what she might have discovered, but he could not leave without seeming suspicious. Thank you all for coming, Dr. Su-Jin began with a warm smile. Today I want to share something that has fascinated me for years. When we humans first joined the galactic community, we began studying the history of other civilizations. What we found was a mystery that took us years to solve. The first slide showed a timeline of galactic history with key events marked in different colors. Dr. Sujin pointed to a cluster of events that all occurred around the same time period. About 14,000 years ago, something happened that changed every major civilization in the galaxy. Military technology advanced rapidly. Defensive strategies became much more sophisticated. Most interesting of all, the basic structure of galactic government changed from loose trade agreements to the formal council system we have today. She clicked to the next slide, which showed examples of similar architectural styles across different worlds. Look at these defensive installations. They were built by species that had never contacted each other, yet they follow nearly identical design principles. It's as if the entire galaxy simultaneously learned to defend against the same type of threat. Dr. Dong Hyun, her research partner, appeared on a communication link from Earth. His face showed the same excitement that Dr. Sujin felt about their discoveries. The patterns go beyond architecture, he said. We found similar developments in weapons technology, military training, methods, and even psychological conditioning. Dozens of species independently developed almost identical responses to some unknown danger. In the audience, several military advisors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They recognized the defensive systems Dr. Sujin was describing because their own civilizations still used updated versions of the same designs. But here's where it gets really interesting, Dr. Sujin continued, her voice rising with enthusiasm. We found references to this unknown threat in the deep archives of several civilizations. The records are fragmentary and heavily classified, but we were able to piece together enough information to identify the source. Catherine felt his heart stop beating. She had found the Omega records. Somehow, human researchers had discovered information that was supposed to be buried forever. Dr. Sujin activated a new display showing linguistic analysis charts. The threat came from a species that the ancient records call Inguhai, from a world designated Jiguthus. According to the fragments we found, they were unlike any other civilization in the galaxy. She paused, looking at her notes with a puzzled expression. What's strange is that the descriptions of the Inguhai are remarkably similar to humans. Similar physical characteristics, similar technological development patterns, even similar social structures. It's almost as if... Dr. Sujin stopped speaking. Her eyes widened as she looked at the data on her screen, then at the audience, then back at the screen. The color drained from her face as understanding dawned. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the silent auditorium. "We're not similar to them, we are them." The silence in the room was complete and terrible. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Dr. Sujin stood frozen at the podium, staring at evidence that proved humanity were the descendants of the galaxy's greatest nightmare. "The linguistic patterns," she said quietly, as if talking to herself. Inguhai to Ingan, Jiguthus to Jigu. The slight changes make perfect sense if you account for language evolution over 14,000 years. Dr. Dong Hyun's face on the communication screen showed the same shocked realization. "Sujin, if this is true, then everything we've been doing, the colony expansion, the exploration missions, the defensive preparations, it's all following the same patterns as our ancestors." In that moment, something fundamental changed in Dr. Sujin's posture and expression. The change was subtle, but every military officer in the audience recognized it. The transformation from civilian academic to strategic thinker was unmistakable. "I need to contact our colonies immediately," she said, her voice now calm and focused. "There are historical sites they should examine more carefully, sites that might contain information about our true heritage." She began gathering her materials with quick, efficient movements. The enthusiastic scholar was gone, replaced by someone who thought in terms of resources, positioning, and strategic advantage. "Dr. Sujin," called out Counselor Velthar from the audience, his crystal form flickering with nervous energy. "Perhaps we should discuss these findings before you share them with your government." Dr. Sujin looked at him with eyes that seemed older, and more calculating than they had been just minutes before. With respect, Counselor, I think we've discussed enough. My people have the right to know who they really are. As she walked out of the auditorium, her footsteps echoing in the continued silence, Dr. Su-jin was already thinking about the implications of her discovery. 17 human colonies positioned at strategic locations throughout the galaxy. 40 million humans with genetic memories of conquest and survival. Technologies that their ancestors had used to bring civilizations to their knees. Behind her, the assembled scholars and intelligence agents finally began to move and whisper among themselves, but their voices were hushed and fearful, like children discussing monsters in the dark. Within hours, emergency communications were racing across the galaxy. Human colony commanders received encrypted messages telling them to investigate nearby archaeological sites. Human exploration teams suddenly changed their priorities, focusing on ruins that matched descriptions from newly discovered historical records. Human military officers began reviewing defensive strategies with fresh eyes, seeing possibilities they had never considered before. On Earth, government leaders gathered in emergency sessions to discuss the revelation that they were the descendants of a species that had once terrorized the galaxy. Some were horrified by this knowledge. Others were fascinated. A few were quietly pleased to learn that humanity had such a powerful heritage. In the deepest chambers of the Galactic Council, emergency meetings convened as leaders tried to decide how to respond to humanity's awakening. Some called for immediate military action before humans could fully remember their capabilities. Others argued for diplomatic solutions. A few suggested that it might already be too late for any solution at all. But perhaps the most significant change was in the humans themselves. Across the galaxy, in colonies and exploration ships and research stations, humans who learned about their true nature felt something awakening inside them. Not anger or bloodlust, but a sense of completion, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. Commander Daeho, reviewing new intelligence from the archaeological sites, found himself making strategic assessments that he had never consciously learned. Admiral Yoon Seo, planning the next phase of colonial expansion, realized that her fleet was positioned to control key hyperlanes throughout the sector. Dr. Su-jin, sharing her discoveries with colleagues on Earth, understood that knowledge itself could be the most powerful weapon of all. The galaxy's voice had indeed been silenced by terror, but not in the way anyone had expected. It had been replaced by something quieter and more dangerous. The sound of humans remembering who they were and beginning to plan what they would become. The age of peaceful coexistence was ending, not with declarations of war or shows of force, but with the soft whisper of ancient instincts awakening and the gentle click of pieces moving into position on a galactic chessboard. The children of the Inguhai were home at last.